My name is Jasmine Hart. I'm 35. I walked into my parents' house and found my entire family celebrating the sale of my home. My younger brother Derek stood in the dining room holding champagne, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Which in his mind he had. $850,000, he announced to the room. Full cash offer. I sold Jasmine's cabin while she was gone. The applause hit me like a slap. My mother actually cried happy tears. My father called it the smartest financial decision I'd ever made. There was a congratulations cake with my name on it in blue frosting. I hadn't made any decision. I'd been in the Yukon wilderness for 6 months tracking wolves, completely off-grid. No cell service. No internet. Just me, the snow, and endangered animals that needed protection. Derek had forged my signature and sold my property without my permission. But here's what my family didn't know as they popped bottles and cut cake. That Montana cabin sits on federally protected land. The deed carries a permanent conservation easement that makes any sale without government approval a federal crime. Derek had just committed wire fraud, identity theft, and violated the Endangered Species Act all in one spectacular move. The FBI would be very interested in his little real estate transaction. As I watched my family celebrate, I realized they had no idea what was coming. The buyers were planning to tear down the cabin and build a mansion. Federal agents were probably already opening a case file. My brother was about to learn what happens when you steal protected wildlife habitat. Let me back up and explain how we got here because my family's reaction makes perfect sense once you understand who we are. The Harts built their fortune flipping houses in Chicago suburbs. My parents, Richard and Susan, could smell a profitable deal from 3 zip codes away. Our dinner table conversations revolved around cap rates, appreciation curves, and which neighborhoods were about to pop. My sister Natalie became a corporate lawyer specializing in real estate law. My brother Derek joined the family business straight out of college, charming sellers into lowball offers and buyers into bidding wars. They lived for the thrill of the deal. Then there was me. While my siblings studied market trends, I memorized bird migration patterns. While they calculated square footage, I counted endangered species. I became a wildlife researcher who spent months in remote locations tracking animals most people never see. My family tolerated my career the way you tolerate a relative's weird hobby. The cabin came from my grandparents, Edwin and Lila. They were the rebels in our money-focused family. He taught biology. She documented rare plants for the state conservation department. Their 40-acre property in Montana bordered the national forest, and they'd placed it under federal protection decades ago to preserve critical habitat. When they died 7 years ago and left me the cabin, my parents were furious. Not because they wanted the land, but because they saw wasted potential. Prime real estate sitting unused when it could be developed into luxury homes. Sell it and buy something practical became their constant refrain. That cabin is a money pit, Dad would say. You could have a nice condo instead, Mom would add. Derek sent me real estate listings daily with subject lines like, better investment and cash out now. They never understood that the property wasn't an investment to me. It was a research station, a sanctuary, and the only place on Earth that felt like home. I'd spent years upgrading it with solar panels and water collection systems. I hosted graduate students studying the protected ecosystem. I filed annual monitoring reports with Fish and Wildlife Services. Every improvement I made was designed to minimize human impact while supporting conservation research. But to my family, I was just the disappointing daughter who chose animals over profit. 3 years ago, Derek's finances got tight. Some cryptocurrency investments went bad, and a restaurant he'd opened closed within 6 months. He started asking more frequently about the cabin's value, sending me market comparisons and buyer contacts. I should have seen the signs. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had family members who thought they knew what was best for your life better than you did? The morning after the celebration dinner, I cornered Derek at his downtown office. He was sorting through paperwork with the satisfied look of someone who just closed a major deal. How exactly did you sell my property without me? I asked, keeping my voice level. Derek didn't even look up from his desk. Power of attorney. You signed the documents years ago when you started doing those long research trips. Remember? For emergencies. I remembered signing something when I first started taking extended fieldwork assignments. A basic document allowing someone to handle urgent matters if I was unreachable. But I'd specifically limited it to medical decisions and bill payments. That wasn't authorization to sell real estate, Derek. Emergency financial decisions were covered, he said, finally meeting my eyes. Look, you've been gone for 6 months. The market was hot. I got you an incredible price. He pulled out a folder thick with contracts and handed me a check with more zeros than I'd ever seen on paper made out to my name. The buyers are a tech couple from San Francisco. They fell in love with the location sight unseen. Paid full asking price, no inspection, cash deal. They're planning to tear down that old cabin and build something amazing, floor-to-ceiling windows, infinity pool, the works. My stomach dropped. An infinity pool on protected wetlands. Construction equipment on critical nesting habitat. Everything my grandparents had fought to preserve, destroyed for someone's vacation home fantasy. When does the deal close? I asked. Already closed, Derek said, beaming. Yesterday. I wanted to surprise you with the final check. The buyers are meeting with architects next week to start planning the new house. He slid the check across his desk toward me like he was presenting an award. The title company handled everything. I used DocuSign for your signature, since you were unreachable. Simple process. Everyone was thrilled to work with such motivated sellers. DocuSign. He'd forged my digital signature on legal documents. Who represented me during closing? I handled it all. Seller's agent, family representative, the whole thing. Saved you thousands in fees. I stared at the check. $850,000 for land that couldn't legally be sold. Money from buyers who had no idea they'd just purchased protected federal habitat. A transaction that would trigger multiple government investigations the moment anyone tried to actually build on the property. Derek, I said carefully, did you research the property restrictions before listing it? He waved dismissively. It's your land. You can do whatever you want with your own property. That's America. I folded the check and put it in my pocket without looking at it again. I need copies of all the closing documents.
Why?
Is there a problem? I looked at my brother. Charming, confident, completely unaware that he'd just committed multiple federal crimes, and realized he genuinely had no idea what he'd done. No problem, I lied. I just want records for my taxes. That afternoon, I called my attorney. Mariela Santos had been my attorney for 5 years, ever since I needed help navigating research permits on federal land. She specialized in environmental law and had seen every possible way people could accidentally run afoul of wildlife protection statutes. I spread Derek's closing documents across her conference table like evidence at a crime scene. Tell me how bad this is, I said. Mariela read in silence for 20 minutes, occasionally making notes or pulling up legal codes on her computer. Her expression grew more serious with each page. Your brother didn't just sell protected land, she finally said. He sold it using forged documents, false representation, and fraudulent power of attorney claims. The buyer's attorney should have caught the federal restrictions during title search, but somehow they missed it. She pulled up a map on her laptop showing my property outlined in red. This entire area is designated critical habitat for 3 endangered species. The conservation easement language is right here in the deed. No construction, no development, no alteration of natural features without fish and wildlife approval. Any legitimate title company would have flagged this immediately. So, what happens now? The buyers will try to get building permits. The county will deny them and refer the application to federal agencies. Then investigators will want to know how this sale was approved in the first place. She leaned back in her chair, studying the documents again. Jasmine, this isn't just a civil matter. Your brother committed wire fraud by using electronic signatures to impersonate you. He violated federal banking regulations by accepting payment for property he doesn't own. And if the buyers actually try to build, they'll trigger Endangered Species Act violations. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown Montana number. This is Timothy Ellison, the voice said when I answered. We purchased your property through your brother's representation. We're having some issues with permits and wondered if we could speak. I put the call on speaker so Mariela could hear. What kind of issues, Mr. Ellison? The county planning department is saying there are federal restrictions on the land. Our architect can't get approval for basic site preparation. We're scheduled to break ground next month. Mariela motioned for me to stay quiet. I'm actually traveling right now, I said. Can you send me details about what the county told you? They mentioned something about protected species and wetlands. But your brother assured us the land was completely buildable. He said you'd handled all environmental clearances already. After I hung up, Mariela pulled up more legal codes on her screen. Here's my advice, she said. Do nothing. Don't contact your brother, don't call the buyers back, don't try to fix this. Let the system work exactly as it's designed to work. Even though innocent people are going to get hurt, the Ellisons have attorneys. Those attorneys should have done proper due diligence before their clients spent nearly $1 million. Everyone in this chain made choices. Let them face the consequences of those choices. She gathered the documents into a neat stack. Your brother set this machine in motion when he forged your signature. Now that machine is going to run its course. Federal agencies don't negotiate when it comes to protected habitat. How long before they figure it out? Based on similar cases? 2 weeks, maybe 3. I flew back to Montana the next day, driving the familiar winding road to the cabin as autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and rust. But something was wrong the moment I pulled into the clearing. Orange survey stakes dotted my meadow like birthday candles on a cake I never ordered. Bright ribbon fluttered from posts driven into soil where rare orchids bloomed each spring. Someone had taken core samples from the wetland area, cylindrical holes in the earth like wounds. At the road entrance, a professional sign announced, "Future home of Elliston Ridge Estate." I photographed everything. GPS coordinates, timestamps, close-ups of the survey equipment. Then I walked the property boundaries, checking the federal markers that had been there since my grandparents' time. The cabin smelled like old wood and the faint smoke of last winter's fires, exactly as I'd left it. But through the windows, I could see more evidence of uninvited visitors. Footprints in the soft earth around my research equipment. Tire tracks from vehicles I'd never authorized. My phone finally picked up signal, and messages flooded in. 3 from Derek, increasingly frantic. 2 from my parents. 1 from a number I didn't recognize. The unknown caller had left a voicemail. "Ms. Hart, this is Agent Jennifer Walsh with Fish and Wildlife Services. We need to discuss recent permit applications on your Gallatin County property. Please call me as soon as possible." Derek's messages escalated from confident to confused to panicked. Message 1. "Hey, buyers are asking weird questions about permits. Can you call them and smooth this over?" Message 2. "Jasmine, seriously, call me. The county is giving the Ellisons problems about building." Message 3. "Where are you? The buyer's attorney is saying something about federal violations. This is urgent." I called Derek back. "What did you do?" he demanded before I could say hello. "I'm standing on my property, looking at survey stakes and core samples." "What did you do?" "The buyers say they can't get permits. They're talking about protected species and federal oversight. You never mentioned any of that. Because you never asked. You just assumed you could sell 40 acres of federally protected habitat without consequences." There was a long silence. "Federal what now?" "Derek, this land has been under conservation easement since 1979.
Permanent restriction.
No development, no construction, no alteration of natural features. It's written into the deed you used to sell property you don't own." "That's impossible. I researched the property value extensively." "You researched market prices. Did you research the legal restrictions?" Another silence, longer this time. How was I supposed to know about some obscure environmental rules? By reading the deed before you forged my signature on it. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the call. "Okay, this is fixable," he said. "You can apply for exemptions or permits or whatever. People build on protected land all the time."
No, Derek.
"They don't. That's what protected means." "So, what are you telling me?" I looked out at the survey stakes scattered across my meadow like markers for a grave that would never be dug. "I'm telling you that the FBI will probably want to talk to you soon." The line went dead. That night, Agent Walsh called me back. The federal building in Billings smelled like industrial coffee and old carpet. Agent Jennifer Walsh led me and Mariella through security scanners and down hallways lined with portraits of officials whose names I'd never learned. The interview room was exactly what you'd expect: gray walls, fluorescent lights, a table that had seen too many confessions. Agent Walsh was joined by Agent David Kim from the FBI's white-collar crime unit and someone from the U.S. Attorney's Office whose business card I didn't catch. "We appreciate you coming in voluntarily," Agent Walsh began, setting a digital recorder on the table. "We're investigating irregularities in the recent sale of your Gallatin County property." I had brought everything. Copies of the original conservation easement from 1979. My grandparents' correspondence with Fish and Wildlife Services. Annual monitoring reports I'd filed for 7 years. Photos of the protected species on the property. GPS coordinates of eagle nesting sites. "Walk us through your relationship with the property," Agent Kim said. I explained the inheritance, the research station I'd established, the graduate students who came to study the protected ecosystem. I showed them emails I'd sent to Derek over the years, explicitly stating the land was not for sale. Did you ever give your brother permission to sell the property? Agent Walsh asked. Never. Did you sign a power of attorney authorizing real estate transactions? I signed a limited power of attorney for medical emergencies and bill payments while I was on research assignments. Nothing about selling property. Agent Kim pulled out a thick folder of documents. These are the closing papers from your brother's transaction. Your signature appears on multiple pages. Mariella leaned forward. My client will need to examine those signatures. They showed me page after page of documents I'd never seen, bearing signatures that looked like mine but weren't. The digital signatures were clearly forged. Derek had used some kind of signature software to replicate my name on DocuSign documents. The buyers paid $850,000 for land they believed was developable, Agent Walsh continued. They've already invested additional money in architectural plans and survey work. When they tried to obtain building permits, county officials immediately flagged the federal restrictions. What happens to them? I asked. That depends on how cooperative everyone is with our investigation, the U.S. Attorney Representative said. Right now, we're looking at wire fraud, identity theft, and potentially conspiracy if other family members were involved. The interview lasted 3 hours. They asked about Derek's financial situation, my parents' knowledge of the transaction, the title company's role in missing the federal restrictions. I answered every question honestly, providing documentation for everything I claimed. One more thing, Agent Kim said as we were wrapping up. Have any family members contacted you about this investigation? Not yet, I said. But they will. That evening, my entire family ambushed me in the hotel lobby. My mother's makeup was streaked with tears. My father looked like his favorite stock had just crashed. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes, and Natalie stood slightly apart from the group like she was trying to distance herself from whatever was coming. We need to talk, my father said through gritted teeth. I looked at their faces. Anger, fear, desperation, and something that might have been shame. Yes, I said. We do. My father rented a conference room at the hotel, the kind of sterile space where corporate mergers die and families implode. He sat at the head of the table like he was chairing a board meeting, but his usual commanding presence felt forced. This has gone too far, he began. We handle family business internally. Always have. My mother dabbed her eyes with tissues that were already shredded. People are talking, Jasmine. The neighbors, the country club. Everyone knows the FBI questioned Derek. Because Derek committed federal crimes, I said. Alleged crimes, Natalie corrected automatically, her lawyer training kicking in. Derek finally looked up from his hands. I was trying to help you. That cabin was draining money you don't have for a lifestyle that isn't sustainable. I saw an opportunity to set you up financially by forging my signature and selling protected federal land. I didn't know about the federal thing, he snapped. You never told us about any environmental restrictions. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to emails I'd sent the family over the years. March 15, 2019. The property is under permanent conservation easement and cannot be developed. June 3, 2020. Please stop sending me real estate listings. The land is federally protected. September 12, 2022. I will never sell this property. It's critical habitat for endangered species. I looked around the table. I told you repeatedly. You chose not to listen. My father leaned forward. What do you want from us, Jasmine? I want Derek to take responsibility for what he did. He was trying to help family, my mother pleaded. Doesn't that count for something? He stole from me, Mom. He impersonated me to federal agents. He defrauded innocent buyers out of nearly $1 million. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. The agent said I could face 10 years in federal prison. What did you tell them? Natalie asked sharply. Nothing yet. My attorney said to keep quiet until we understand all the charges. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. Here's what I can offer, I said. I'll tell investigators that I don't want maximum penalties if Derek cooperates fully, makes complete restitution to the buyers, and pleads guilty to all charges. You're bargaining with your brother's life, my father said. I'm offering him the only path that doesn't end with him learning federal prison isn't like the movies. My mother broke down completely. Please, Jasmine. He's your brother. He's also a criminal, I said. Both things can be true. Derek stood up abruptly. What if I make this right? Pay back the buyers, fix the paperwork somehow, make it like this never happened. You can't unforge signatures, Derek. You can't unsell protected land. The FBI doesn't negotiate with people who commit wire fraud. Natalie had been quiet, reading something on her phone. Derek, she said slowly, how many other deals have you closed using questionable documentation? The room went dead silent. What do you mean? He asked. I mean the FBI doesn't investigate isolated incidents. They investigate patterns. If they found problems with Jasmine's sale, they're probably looking at your other transactions too. Derek's face went white. That's completely different. Those were legitimate business deals. With forged signatures? I asked. With expedited documentation, he said weakly. My father put his head in his hands. How many properties are we talking about? Derek didn't answer, but his silence told us everything. The Hart family empire wasn't just built on flipped houses. It was built on a foundation of forged documents and fraudulent deals that were about to crumble under federal investigation. The investigation exploded outward like cracks in a windshield. Within a week, federal agents had subpoenaed records from every real estate transaction Derek had touched in the past 5 years. My parents' phone rang constantly, reporters, former clients, attorneys representing buyers who were now questioning their own purchases. The Hart family name, which had opened doors throughout Chicago's real estate market for decades, became toxic overnight. Derek hired a white-collar defense attorney who charged more per hour than most people make in a week. The attorney's advice was simple: cooperate completely or face the full weight of federal prosecution. The evidence against Derek was overwhelming. The FBI's forensic accountants had traced the money trail from the fraudulent sale through multiple accounts. They'd found the fake Gmail account he'd created in my name to communicate with the buyers. They'd recovered deleted text messages where he bragged to friends about handling Jasmine's situation while she was off playing with animals. But the worst discovery came when investigators examined the title company Derek had used. The notary who claimed to have witnessed my signature on the closing documents had never met me. She'd been paid an extra $500 to notarize documents without proper identification, a federal crime in itself. The Ellisons' attorney delivered the killing blow. Their due diligence revealed that Derek had provided fraudulent environmental clearance certificates, claiming all federal permits had been obtained. He'd created fake letterhead from Fish and Wildlife Services and forged signatures from officials who didn't exist. When confronted with this evidence, Derek's facade finally cracked. I needed the money, he confessed to investigators, his attorney sitting beside him looking like he wanted to disappear. The crypto losses were bigger than I told anyone. I owed people who don't accept payment plans. He'd been borrowing against properties he didn't own, using forged documents to secure bridge loans, creating fake sale contracts to show lenders he had deals closing. My cabin wasn't his first fraud, it was just the one that exposed all the others. The ripple effects hit our parents' business immediately. Banks froze accounts pending investigation. Clients pulled listings. Contractors refused to work on projects associated with the Hart name. Properties that had been scheduled to close fell through when buyers discovered the family connection. My father was forced to testify before a federal grand jury about his knowledge of Derek's business practices. He claimed ignorance, but emails revealed he'd questioned some of Derek's expedited closings and been told not to worry about the details. The social consequences destroyed my mother. Her garden club membership was quietly revoked. Country club friends stopped returning calls. The charity boards where she'd served for years asked her to step down to avoid any appearance of impropriety. But the most shocking revelation came from my sister. Natalie called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice hollow with exhaustion. I've been reviewing Derek's files, she said, as his attorney of record for some transactions. I found something you need to know. She discovered that Derek had tried to forge powers of attorney for both me and our parents, not just to sell my property, but to access Dad's retirement accounts and Mom's inheritance from her parents. He was planning to steal from all of us, she said. Your cabin was just the beginning. The FBI agents weren't surprised when I shared this information. They'd already traced suspicious activity in multiple accounts connected to the Hart family name. Derek's defense attorney called for a plea conference. The charges had grown to include conspiracy, elder fraud, and racketeering. Without a plea deal, he was looking at decades in federal prison. My parents begged me to meet with Derek before he entered his plea. He wants to apologize, my mother said through tears. Face to face. Family to family. I agreed to see him one time. In a federal courthouse, with attorneys present, on the record. Some conversations you have because they're necessary. Others you have because they're final. The federal courthouse in Chicago felt like a cathedral built for judgment. Derek sat across from me in a conference room, flanked by his defense attorney and a prosecutor who looked like she'd never lost a case. He'd aged years in the past month. Hollowed cheeks, trembling hands, the kind of weight loss that comes from stress eating your body from the inside. "I need you to know I never meant for this to hurt you," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you knew it would hurt the buyers," I said. "You knew they were paying for property they couldn't actually develop." He nodded, staring at his hands. "I told myself they were rich enough to absorb the loss. Tech money, you know? They could afford to lose $1 million. That's not how this works, Derek. Rich people don't stay rich by accepting fraud." His attorney slid a document across the table. "Your brother is prepared to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 3 to 5 years. He'll make full restitution to all victims and cooperate with ongoing investigations into the title company and notary." I looked at the plea agreement.
Wire fraud.
Identity theft, mail fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. The list went on for 3 pages. "What about Mom and Dad's business?" "They're considered victims of Derek's fraud, not co-conspirators," the prosecutor said. "Your father's testimony about questioning Derek's methods actually helped establish that Derek was operating independently." Derek looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "The Ellisons will get their money back. All of it. I'm liquidating everything, the condo, the car, the investment accounts. Dad's putting up property as collateral for the rest. And my land. The sale is void. The property reverts to you, with clear title. The conservation easement remains intact." I studied my brother's face, looking for some trace of the charming dealmaker who'd convinced our family he was protecting my interests. All I saw was a broken man who'd gambled away everything that mattered for money he didn't need. "Why?" I asked. "We weren't poor. The family business was successful. Why risk everything for one more deal?" Derek was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Because I wasn't good enough. Natalie is brilliant, law review, federal clerkship, partnership track at a major firm. You're saving endangered species and winning research grants. I just sold houses. Anyone can sell houses." He wiped his nose with a tissue that was already shredded. "The crypto losses made me desperate, but that's not why I started cutting corners. I started because I needed to prove I was as smart as my sisters. And every shortcut made the next one easier." The prosecutor checked her watch. "Mr. Hart, are you prepared to enter your plea?" Derek signed the agreement with hands that shook so badly his attorney had to guide him through the pages. In the courthouse hallway afterward, my parents waited on a bench like patients in a terminal ward. My mother stood when she saw us, hope and terror competing in her expression. 3 years minimum security, I told them. He'll probably serve 2 with good behavior. My father nodded grimly. "The business is finished. We're selling everything to pay restitution." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. "Don't be," he replied. "We raised him. We taught him that winning mattered more than how you won. This is our failure too." Derek was led away in handcuffs, a formality for federal plea hearings, but the sight of it broke my mother's heart audibly. 6 months later, I received a letter from federal prison. The return address just said D. Hart. Derek's first letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, written on lined paper in handwriting I barely recognized. Prison had stripped away his salesman's confidence, leaving behind careful words and uncertain penmanship. "Jasmine, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to apologize properly. But my counselor says I need to write this, so here goes. I destroyed our family because I was afraid of being ordinary. Everyone else had these amazing careers, and I was just a guy who talked people into buying houses. When the crypto thing went bad, I panicked. Started taking shortcuts. Each one made the next one feel normal. Your cabin wasn't about money. It was about proving I could make the big play, close the impossible deal. I told myself you'd thank me when you saw the check. I was wrong about everything. The federal prosecutor showed me pictures of the eagles on your property. The orchids.
The wolves.
I never knew any of that existed. To me, it was just empty land with potential. I'm taking classes here. Environmental law, conservation biology, sustainable development. Learning about the things you tried to tell us for years. Learning what I destroyed. I don't know if you'll write back. I wouldn't if I were you. But I needed you to know that I understand now. You weren't saving land. You were keeping a promise to people who trusted you with something irreplaceable. I threw away that trust for money I didn't need to impress people who didn't matter. Your brother, if you'll still claim me."
Derek.
I set the letter aside and didn't respond for 2 months. Then another letter arrived, shorter and different in tone. "Jasmine, I'm working in the prison library now. helped set up an environmental science section. Inmates can study for GEDs and college credit. A lot of guys here made decisions like mine: quick money, long consequences. Teaching them about conservation easements and protected species. Turns out understanding environmental law might keep some people out of places like this. I know you don't owe me anything, but if you have book recommendations, I'd appreciate them. Trying to build a program that means something. Derek. This time I wrote back. Just a postcard with a reading list. Start with Aldo Leopold. Work your way toward current field guides. Learn the names of what you almost destroyed. His third letter came with a photograph. Derek in prison khaki, surrounded by other inmates holding certificates for completing an environmental compliance course. We're calling it the Second Chance Conservation Program. Teaching guys how to work in environmental remediation when they get out. Cleaning up the messes instead of making them. I know it doesn't fix what I did, but maybe it stops someone else from making the same mistakes. Thank you for the reading list. Thank you for not giving up on me completely. By winter, Derek's letters had evolved into detailed discussions of habitat restoration and conservation law. He was becoming the person I'd always hoped he could be, but it had taken federal prison to get him there. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, my parents drove out to Montana to see the cabin for the first time in over a decade. They arrived in Dad's pickup truck instead of the luxury SUV they used to drive, one of many downgrades forced by paying restitution. They stood in my driveway like tourists visiting a foreign country, unsure what to photograph or how to behave. It's smaller than I remembered, Mom said, adjusting her sunglasses. The building is small, I replied. The land is 40 acres. Dad walked the perimeter of the cabin, running his hands along the solar panels I'd installed. This actually works? Generates enough power? More than I need most days. Batteries store the excess. I led them through the meadow, where Derek's survey stakes had once stood. New wildflowers were growing in the disturbed soil, nature's way of healing scars. Mom stopped at a cluster of purple blooms, kneeling to examine them closer. What are these called? Mountain lupin. The endangered butterfly species depends on them for breeding habitat. She nodded, absorbing this information like she was studying for a test. We climbed to the ridge where the eagles nested. Dad was breathing hard by the time we reached the overlook, but his expression had changed from skeptical to something approaching wonder. You can see for miles, he said quietly. That's why this spot is critical for raptors. They need unobstructed views for hunting. A golden eagle circled overhead, riding thermals with the kind of effortless grace that makes flight look like meditation. We watched in silence until it disappeared over the far ridgeline. Derek's letters mention the eagles, Mom said. He's been reading about their migration patterns. He asked me to send him research papers on protected species. Says he's teaching other inmates about conservation law. Dad studied my face. Are you proud of him? For what he's doing now? The question caught me off guard. Pride felt like the wrong word for someone learning basic respect for nature while serving time for federal crimes. I'm hopeful, I said finally. Change is possible, but it has to be real change, not just prison conversion that disappears when he gets out. We walked back to the cabin as afternoon shadows stretched across the meadow. My phone chimed with a text from Natalie. Derek asked if he could donate his prison wages to a research fund. It's only $47 a month, but he says it matters to try. Mom read the message over my shoulder. Her eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in months, they looked like happy tears. Your grandparents used to say that, she whispered. Do what you can with what you have. It matters to try. That evening, they helped me sort equipment for the next season's wildlife surveys. Dad asked thoughtful questions about radio collars and GPS tracking. Mom took careful notes about which plants provided the best cover for nesting birds. They were learning to see the land the way I'd always seen it, not as empty space waiting for development, but as home to creatures whose survival depended on our restraint. A year after the federal case closed, my father called a family meeting at their downsized condo. The space felt cramped compared to their old house, but somehow more honest. No formal dining room for power plays, just a kitchen table where real conversations happened. Your mother and I have been talking, Dad began, setting down a folder of documents. We want to establish a family foundation focused on conservation education and environmental compliance. I looked at Natalie, who nodded. They ran this by me first. It's legitimate. Proper legal structure, community oversight board, transparent funding. The idea came from Derek's letters, Mom added. He's been describing the education programs at the prison, how many inmates had no idea their business practices violated environmental laws. Dad opened the folder, revealing incorporation papers and mission statements written in careful legal language. We want to help small developers understand conservation requirements before they make costly mistakes. Provide resources for compliance training. Fund habitat restoration projects. And Derek? I asked. When he's released, we'd like him to run the compliance education program, Dad said. If you approve. His experience, both the mistakes and the consequences, gives him credibility with people who might make similar choices. I studied the proposed foundation structure. Independent board of directors. Environmental scientists as advisors. Annual reporting requirements. Everything designed to prevent the kind of family-controlled corruption that had destroyed our real estate business. There are conditions, I said. Full transparency. No Hart family members on the board of directors. And Derek has to complete 2 years of supervised community service in environmental restoration before he touches any foundation money. Agreed, Dad said immediately. Mom pulled out another document, a land conservation easement for 3 properties my parents still owned. We're donating these to the foundation, she said. 27 acres total. Not as significant as your land, but suitable for habitat restoration and education programs. This is where we should have started 30 years ago, Dad admitted. Teaching people to build without destroying. Working with the land instead of against it. A week later, a package arrived at the cabin from federal prison. Inside was a wooden plaque Derek had made in the prison workshop, burned with clean lettering. Hart Family Conservation Foundation *. Established 2020 4 *. Learning to build without destroying *. A note in Derek's careful handwriting was attached. For the foundation office when I get out. If I get to be part of it. Some mistakes teach lessons that stick if you let them. Hope I've learned enough to help others avoid the path I took. *. See you on the other side of this. *. I hung the plaque in my cabin office, right next to the federal protection notices that had started this whole mess. Sometimes redemption begins with admitting what you've lost. Sometimes it begins with building something entirely new from the pieces that remain. The Hart family story spread through conservation circles faster than wildfire through dry grass. Not the scandal. Everyone already knew about Derek's federal conviction, but the aftermath. The foundation. The family that chose restoration over revenge. Other families started reaching out. A rancher in Colorado whose son had illegally diverted water from protected wetlands. A developer in Oregon whose daughter had built luxury cabins on spotted owl habitat. Parents whose children's environmental crimes had shattered their own understanding of right and wrong. We don't know how to fix this, became the common refrain. How do you rebuild trust when your own family violated everything you thought you believed? The Foundation's first program launched 6 months after Derek's imprisonment. Environmental compliance workshops for small developers who couldn't afford big firm legal advice. We taught them to read conservation easements, identify protected species, navigate federal permitting processes before breaking ground. Natalie left her corporate law practice to run the legal education side. I spent years helping big developers work around environmental rules, she told me. Time to help small ones work within them. Mom became the workshop coordinator, her social skills finally channeled towards something meaningful. She treated every developer like a country club member who'd lost their way, with patient education rather than judgment. Dad handled the practical side, teaching construction techniques that minimized environmental impact. 40 years of flipping houses taught me how to build fast and cheap, he said. Now I'm learning to build right. The most surprising convert was Timothy Ellison, the tech executive who'd almost built on my protected land. He started attending our workshops, then volunteering, then funding habitat restoration projects across 3 states. Your brother's fraud saved us from becoming environmental criminals ourselves, he told me. We were so focused on our dream house that we never questioned whether we had the right to build it. Derek's prison letters evolved from personal apologies to detailed case studies of environmental crimes he encountered. Inmates who'd dumped chemicals in rivers to save disposal costs. Construction crews who'd filled wetlands without permits. Real estate agents who'd lied about flood zones and contamination risks. Half the guys in here are environmental criminals who didn't know they were breaking environmental laws, he wrote. The other half knew exactly what they were doing and thought they wouldn't get caught. Education might help the first group. Prison is probably the only thing that stops the second. His release date was still 8 months away, but Derek was already developing curriculum for post-release compliance training. Prison librarians were helping him create educational materials that could be used in schools and trade programs. "I want kids to learn about habitat protection before they're old enough to destroy it," he wrote. "Want contractors to understand species law before they bid on projects that violate it." The foundation received its first major donation from an unlikely source, the title company that had facilitated Derek's fraudulent sale. Their insurance settlement included funds earmarked for conservation education, a corporate attempt to repair damage their negligence had enabled. By year's end, we trained over 200 developers, prevented dozens of environmental violations, and restored habitat on more than 500 acres of damaged land. Derek's crime had created something larger than his punishment. Derek walked out of federal prison on a crisp October morning, wearing clothes that no longer fit and carrying a box of books I'd sent him over 2 years. My parents waited in the parking lot like grandparents picking up a child from summer camp, nervous, hopeful, unsure what version of their son would emerge. He looked older, harder around the edges, but his eyes were clearer than I'd seen them since we were kids. Prison had stripped away the salesman's smile and left behind something more genuine. "Thank you for coming," he said to me, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Thank you for earning the right to a second chance." We drove to the cabin together, Derek's first time seeing the property since his arrest. He stood in the meadow where his survey stakes had once marked future destruction, watching golden eagles circle overhead. "I never saw them before," he said quietly. "I walked this land with buyers and architects and never once looked up. What do you see now?" He was quiet for a long time, studying the ridge where the eagles nested, the wetlands where endangered orchids bloomed, the forest edge where deer emerged at dusk. "Home," he said finally. "I see what Grandpa and Grandma saw, what you've been protecting, what I almost destroyed for people who would have turned it into a postcard." That evening, Derek met with the foundation board to present his post-release program proposal. 2 years of prison education had transformed him into something I'd never expected, a knowledgeable advocate for environmental protection. "I want to work with at-risk developers," he explained to the board. "People facing financial pressure, people who might cut corners the way I did. Show them the real costs of environmental crimes before they make life-destroying decisions." Board member Dr. Sarah Chen, a wildlife biologist, asked pointed questions about Derek's qualifications and motivations. "What makes you think people will listen to someone with a federal conviction?" Derek pulled out letters from inmates he'd taught in prison. Construction workers, real estate agents, small business owners who'd violated environmental laws out of ignorance or desperation. "Because I speak their language," he said. "I understand the pressures that make illegal shortcuts look reasonable, and I can show them where those shortcuts actually lead." The board approved his program unanimously. Derek's first workshop drew 30 developers from across Montana. He started not with legal theory but with his mugshot, his conviction details, and photos of me standing in handcuffs outside the federal courthouse. "This is what environmental crime looks like," he told the room. "Not some abstract violation, but real consequences for real people who thought they could outsmart federal law." Then he showed pictures of the eagles, the orchids, the restored meadow where his survey stakes had once threatened irreplaceable habitat. "And this is what we're actually protecting. Not bureaucratic red tape, but living systems that took thousands of years to establish and can be destroyed in an afternoon." By year's end, Derek's program had expanded to 4 states. Federal prosecutors started referring defendants to our workshops as part of plea agreements. Environmental law firms hired us to train their clients on compliance requirements. Derek never got his real estate license back, but he found something more valuable: work that mattered for reasons beyond profit. "I spent 40 years learning how to sell things," he told me. "Turns out I'm better at teaching people what's not for sale." 3 years after that celebration dinner where Derek announced he'd sold my home, I hosted a different kind of gathering. Graduate students, fish and wildlife officials, foundation donors, and family members sat around a campfire at the cabin, sharing stories of conservation victories and lessons learned the hard way. Derek tended the fire, his prison-learned skills useful for something productive. Mom and Dad helped serve dinner, vegetables from Mom's community garden, trout from the protected stream that ran through our property. Natalie documented everything for the Foundation's annual report. "This place taught me that some things matter more than money," Derek said during his toast. "Took me 2 years in federal prison to learn what my sister knew at age 12. Timothy Ellison, our former almost buyer turned major donor, raised his glass. "To Jasmine Hart, who saved us from destroying the very thing we came here to find." As darkness settled over the mountains, I walked the property boundaries one final time. The federal markers were still there, weathered but unmoved. The eagle pair had successfully raised 3 chicks this season. The orchid population had recovered from the survey damage. The land was healing, protected, eternal. My phone buzzed with a message from a stranger. Asterisk Miss Hart, my family is facing a situation similar to yours. My brother sold property that belongs to our deceased grandfather without authorization. The land has wetland protections. Can your foundation help? Asterisk. I forwarded the message to Derek. This was his territory now, helping families navigate the intersection of environmental law and family betrayal. His response came immediately. Asterisk on it. We'll contact them tomorrow. Some stories don't have to end the way ours almost did. Asterisk. Back at the fire, someone asked Derek what he'd learned from his experience. That promises are the scaffolding we build ourselves on, he said, glancing at me. My sister kept a promise to our grandparents even when it cost her family relationships. I broke promises for money I didn't need. The difference between those choices is the difference between building something that lasts and destroying something irreplaceable. Dr. Chun, the wildlife biologist who'd initially questioned Derek's qualifications, stood to address the group. 3 years ago, this property almost became another luxury development. Tonight, it's a model for family-based conservation that's being replicated across the country. Sometimes the best protection comes from people who've learned the real cost of destruction. As guests filtered back to their tents and cabins, I sat alone on the porch where my grandparents had watched sunrise over the mountains for 50 years. The wooden plaque Derek had made in prison caught moonlight. Heart-protected lands, preserved forever. A great horned owl called from the ridge, answered by its mate near the stream. Night sounds of a functioning ecosystem, the kind of wild symphony that money can't buy and development can't replicate. My phone lit up with notifications, comments on the foundation's social media posts, emails from other families facing environmental crimes, messages from former workshop participants who'd successfully navigated federal permitting for their projects. Derek's crime had created ripples that spread far beyond our family. His redemption was creating different ripples, ones that protected habitat instead of destroying it. I thought about the people watching our story unfold online, the families torn apart by environmental crimes, the young developers learning to build without destroying. If you're fighting to protect something that matters, whether it's land, family, or principles, keep going. The world needs your promises to hold. The future depends on people who choose preservation over profit, even when it costs them everything they thought they wanted. Some battles you fight for yourself. Others you fight for eagles that will soar over protected ridges long after your name is forgotten. Both kinds of battles matter. Both kinds of promises are worth keeping. The land endures. The protection holds. The story continues. Subscribe if this story hit something you've been carrying. Comment below if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right. This is where we say the quiet parts out loud, where families heal and promises matter more than profit.